Imagine being so incredibly skilled that you suffer the biggest nerf of your life and reincarnate as a complete nobody. Well, that's what everyone thought of him, but what they didn't know was that in his previous life, he sacrificed himself to save his waifus. Thanks to this, he returned to the magical world, but this time his memory was wiped clean. Despite this, fate would have him form a harem of 3 Lolas who would keep him safe from the occasional sensual adversary they'd have to fight. The story begins with a goddess reviving our protagonist, Yuki. Instead of sending him down gently in an elevator, she dropped him from the sky into the new world. Luckily, it was a fantasy world, so he wasn't harmed, although who knows, maybe the blow to the head caused his memory loss and left him a bit dazed. Waiting for him was Kakuro, a waifu tasked by her father and a prophecy to guide and protect him in this world as her lord. When Yuki woke up, he barely managed to say his name, but it didn't matter to her. She already knew he probably wouldn't remember anything and needed to accompany him. She soon realized he was terrible with a sword when some wolves attacked, and he made a fool of himself in front of her. But after she took care of the wolves, she gave him some food and took him to the capital. Meanwhile, we meet a lovely waifu refreshing herself in a river. She seemed to be a queen and was also heading to the capital. On her way, she encountered some guys pretending to be injured. Being kind-hearted, she tried to help them, only to realize they just wanted to steal her sword, which they did. Back to the protagonist, he arrived at the capital of Landasol with Kakuro. As she showed him around the city, it became clear he was worse off than she thought. He acted like a complete baby, barely spoke, and couldn't even differentiate money from food, almost swallowing a coin. Yes, folks, he thought he was a piggy bank. Why use a bank when you can store money in your stomach, right? As night fell, they had no money to rent a place to stay, so they had to sleep outside the city in the forest. There, they almost became wolf food, or rather, Yuki did. To protect him, Kakuro went to the guild the next day to look for work. They found the available missions mostly too difficult, everything from dragon hunting to fighting Goku, so they settled for a mushroom gathering quest in a forest. While gathering mushrooms, Kakuro found a cute little mushroom she named Pachipuchi because that's all it said. Yuki found the waifu who had her sword stolen, passed out. After caring for her and giving her some food, Kakuro nicknamed her Pecorine and learned she was an adventurer exploring new places. Their conversation was interrupted by giant mushrooms summoned by a mage from the dark forest. Who is she and why did she do it? We'll find out later. Surely, Pecorine revealed they were after her and told them to flee, but they didn't leave her alone. The 3 of them started fighting the mushrooms together, well, more like the 2 waifus did most of the fighting since Yuki was quite bad at it. However, he managed to protect Kakuro from being sliced by a mushroom thanks to a flash of memory from his past, which also boosted his friend's attacks. Pecorine then delivered the final blow to all the mushrooms. Yes, this waifu was really powerful. After the danger passed, she ate a mushroom that put her to sleep, so the guys had to carry her. Hey, if you want to know the name of this anime, it will appear during the video below. Leave a comment with the exact minute it appears to get a heart from us, ****. The next day, we found out that the boys left Pecorine in the capital and went to a nearby town to spend the night with the reward they received for the mushrooms. That morning, the protagonist woke up earlier to train and regain his abilities. While he was training, Kakuro saw him but didn't say anything until they went to have breakfast. There, a man suggested they create a guild, as doing so would get them a house to use as a base so they wouldn't have to pay daily rent at hotels. It was an excellent idea, but the man overstepped by saying it in front of the hotel owner, which annoyed him as he was losing customers. Thanks to that idea, the boys decided to go for it, and that became their first goal. Later, they met the princess again, who was in a food contest. Now we know why the waifu is so strong. She eats like Luffy. While they were talking, the waifu encountered the guys who had stolen her sword. Since she was a bit naive, she started chasing them, not to retrieve her sword, but to give them some supposed medicine they had asked for. However, this was just a distraction to rob her. When she got outside the city, she lost sight of them, and a giant boar appeared out of nowhere, looking for a fight. It seemed the boar was being controlled by the mushroom waifu, who had to keep an eye on the princess and didn't like her making friends. Seeing them together provoked her to annoy them, but it didn't go well for her because the princess took down the boar with her bare fists, sending it flying into the wall where the mushroom waifu was hiding, knocking her out. When she woke up, she realized the boys had taken care of her, were kind to her, and tried to feed her. But since the food was hot, she couldn't eat it and left angrily. Then she saw a dragon appear out of nowhere and kidnapped the guys who had robbed Pecorine, seizing the opportunity to get close to her again and make her move. So, she introduced herself to them as Carol and told them the guys they were looking for had been kidnapped by the dragon. She led them to the cave, where the waifu washed her hands of the matter and left them on their own. The protagonist, being the weakest at the moment, had to act as bait so Pecorine could retrieve the sword from the dragon's mouth and defeat it. But things didn't go as planned. The dragon woke up and went berserk, grabbing the protagonist protagonist in one bite and flying off. But thanks to the protagonist's skill, he bought time for the princess to deliver an epic punch and retrieve her sword. On top of that, she saved Carol and took down the dragon with a super powerful ultimate move. After this, they all returned to the town and started eating some rice leftovers, although they did so by choice. After defeating the dragon, they could have gotten money from the guild and eaten well. Speaking of the guild, Pecorine proposed the idea of forming one, which was exactly what they wanted, so they accepted. As for Carol, she wasn't very convinced and left. That same night, we see Carol, the cat girl, thinking about how strong the princess is, which made her very angry. So, she began to follow her around the city to find out her weakness. Meanwhile, the guys who had robbed the princess apologized to her and even invited her to eat as a thank you for saving them. While this was happening, Kokoro went to the job guild to get a form from the receptionist. This form was for the registration of their new member, and instead of filling it out herself, she wanted everyone to sign it. Later, she met up with the protagonist and they went to look for Pecorine. There, they found Carol outside the restaurant where the waifu was eating, spying on her. Taking advantage of the moment, they invited her to join them. They saw that the princess had practically eaten the entire menu, and since the guys were about to burst, they switched places to keep eating. At that moment, we learned that Carol's master had ordered her to keep an eye on the princess. So, Carol reconsidered the guild proposal and thought about telling them she had changed her mind to be closer to the princess and fulfill her mission. But just then, a fat man entered the restaurant and ruined everything. The man, without any reason, twisted the restaurant owner's arm and demanded to be served food, threatening to close the place if he didn't like it. Since the poor old man was injured and couldn't cook, Pecorine took over as a master chef and made him a delicious meal. Carol added the final touch with a drop of lemon. The fat man was so delighted with the food that his soul almost left his body. But suddenly, he snapped, broke the table, threw the food, and declared he would close the restaurant. Well, buddy, you dug your own grave. Pecorine tried to be nice and didn't cooperate, so she had no choice but to throw him out of the restaurant with a single punch. After this, Carol gave them the good news, and each of them signed the registration form. They then submitted it to legally form the guild. The waifus commented that they wanted to investigate all sorts of things, especially to try new foods and ingredients from around the world, aiming to create something like a gourmet guild. When they arrived at their new home, they realized it was not what they expected. Everything was in bad shape, very dirty, and abandoned. However, this did not dampen their spirits, so they rolled up their sleeves and began to repair, clean, and do all sorts of things. On one hand, Pecorine and Kokoro went to buy some items they would need for the house, while Carol and the guy stayed behind cleaning like Cinderella. When Kokoro arrived in town, she went to a stall run by a girl named Saren, who treated her very kindly while she shopped. Saren even offered free delivery with her servant Suzum, knowing that Kokoro, being so small, wouldn't be able to carry all the purchases herself. She arranged for a cart to take everything back to the house. While they were walking through the forest on their way back to the base, Suzum mentioned that she had a good relationship with her mistress and hoped to have something similar with her own lord someday. At that point, the donkey got hungry and Suzum had to stop to feed it. But when she realized that it was dark despite being daytime, she got scared and started screaming. This frightened the donkey as well, and it ran off. Good job, Suzum. Since the two of them couldn't manage the cart alone, they began to search for the donkey. When they thought they had found it, they ended up capturing a giant llama in armor named Rima. After introducing themselves and explaining what had happened, they became friends, and Rima offered to help them with the cart. Meanwhile, the protagonist continued cleaning with Carol. He accidentally slipped and his windows rebooted for a moment. While he was unconscious, he met again with the goddess who had sent him to this world. She told him that he was on the right path since he had already formed a guild with the girls who were part of his destiny. But at the same time, she warned him to be careful with Carol, as she was special and in a bad situation. Even if she gave him spoilers about the future, nothing would change, so he just needed to be cautious, especially since the enemy already knew about him. She also said that the bonds he formed with them would help him grow, and when the time was right, she would assist him, just as she had in the past. At that moment, the guy woke up, and the first thing he saw was Carol looking very worried. He pretended nothing had happened and didn't mention the dream. He just got up as if nothing was wrong. Pecorine arrived with the items she had bought, and they continued remodeling the house. On the other hand, we see that the girls were ambushed by some thieves in the forest. However, they didn't count on Rima giving them a good beating and transforming into a human, or well, half-human. They finally made it to the base. Kokoro explained that they had some issues along the way, but the good news was that they managed to bring everything back and finish remodeling the house. They then celebrated with a good meal prepared by the princess. The next day, the protagonist woke up sick. Poor guy was burning with fever. The only one who wasn't worried was Carol, thinking it was just a cold. But later, she realized it was more serious, so they took him to a supposed hospital. While the waifus examined him, Pekarine and Carol started to doubt them because of how they were dressed. They didn't look like a doctor and nurse, but it was the best they could find in the area, so they had no choice. While Dr. Mitsuki examined him, she noticed a rash on his chest and arm, which alarmed her. She told Nanika to prepare the operating room immediately. They left the girls outside, very worried, and only told them that the supposed operation might make him feel a bit better. Kokoro started performing rituals and praying to her ancient gods to save her lord. Yes, folks, she was delirious, but thankfully the other girls calmed her down a bit. Then the restaurant guy came running in, looking very scared. Well, he wasn't fat anymore since the princess beat him up and sent him there. Now he was as skinny as a straw. He told them it wasn't a hospital, just a prison run by 3 crazy women. When he heard they were in the operating room, he tried to escape, but one of the waifus with horns found him and locked him up again, laughing like a complete psycho. It got late, and Nanika told the waifus to go home. They could visit the guy the next day to see how he was doing. That same night, Eriko went to a fortune teller to find out her fate. As it turns out, she had fallen in love with the protagonist and believed he was her soulmate. She wanted the fortune teller to confirm it, but that didn't end well. Besides, the waifu started fighting everyone on her way out of the neighborhood and got into trouble. The next day, the guys came looking for her, angry. That's when we found out the supposed hospital was actually a guild formed by the 3 of them called Twilight Caravan, and they let us know they don't mess around because they took care of everyone quickly. Upon learning these 3 crazies were playing doctor, the waifus took the guy away and brought him to a real doctor. He said he just needed rest. Despite everything, the doctor had indeed cured him, although her methods were somewhat worrying, and well, after this, they returned home. The next day, the group started looking for work, and Pekarine found a job involving the search for some very strange spices located in the village of Targum. So they set off in that direction. Since the journey was long, they did many things along the way. They fished, had fun, and because they were late collecting something to eat, they had to camp. Luckily, the princess was very skilled at hunting and bagged a turkey, unlike the other 2 who caught some really ugly frogs. After eating, everyone went to sleep while Kokoro kept watch, not wanting a repeat of their wolf encounter from before. We see that the waifu was very happy with her new life and the friends she had made, telling herself that she was glad she had joined that guild. The next morning, as everyone woke up, Kokoro momentarily let her guard down, and a giant wolf kidnapped the protagonist. But in the forest, he was rescued by an elf, Aoi, who was very shy and dreamed of making friends. Since the protagonist only spoke a few words and repeated what she said, she thought he shared the same dream as her, so they became buddies. Well, he was actually her first friend besides his guildmates. During their conversation, the waifus arrived, introduced themselves to Aoi, and thanked her for saving the guy. Afterward, they reached the village where they met Misato from the Forestier Guild, which consisted of Aoi and another waifu named Hatsune, who was quite lazy and was probably sleeping somewhere. But anyway, the truth is that the waifus told Misato they were also there to harvest, and since it was quite a lot, they were waiting for the Elizabeth Park Guild to arrive to help them. Upon hearing that name, Kokoro remembered it was where Rima belonged. Speaking of Rima, we see her on her way with her friend Shirorin, Mahiru, and Rin when out of nowhere, they were attacked by strange creatures emitting a strong black aura around them, and they took their forms. Although the waifus handled them quickly, they ran into trouble when Christina, a tough blonde looking for trouble, showed up. Meanwhile, the protagonists found Hatsune sleeping in the village. She introduced herself to them and told them how happy she was to start harvesting, especially because she was going to reunite with her sister whom she hadn't seen in a long time. She belonged to the guild of waifus that were attacked by the strange creatures, and what she didn't know was that her little sister Shirorin had fallen unconscious during the chaos. She suffered from an illness that made her weaker than others, and just as she was waking up, a creature took advantage and possessed her body. In a change of scene, we see that Hatsune got along very well with her little sister. She used to give her books as gifts and read to her until she fell asleep. However, they were separated since she got sick. On the other hand, the group started harvesting before the other guild arrived because they were tired of waiting and wanted to make the most of their time. Just then, all the waifus arrived looking beaten up. They explained that they were attacked on the way by shadows and a mysterious blonde. They also mentioned they couldn't find Shirorin, so they planned to form a group to rescue her. Speaking of the blonde, we learned that she worked for the same teacher as Carol, but she wasn't involved with the shadows that attacked the waifus. She made it clear when she brushed them off with a single blow. At the same time, she wondered what the person controlling the shadows was searching for. On another note, Hatsune had a strong mental connection with her sister, and that's how they managed to find her. Unfortunately, she was no longer the same. She was now possessed and began to attack them before fleeing. Meanwhile, the shadows reached the village and started causing chaos. Luckily, Pekarine stayed behind to protect the villagers. However, the princess hadn't had a good breakfast, and things were getting tough for her. But Carol was watching from above, unsure if she should help because her mission was the opposite. Yet her heart softened due to all the moments they had lived together, and she joined the fight. She motivated Pecorine, and together they defeated all the shadows. Returning to the protagonist and the other waifus, as they searched for Shirorin, they encountered the blonde who had beaten them badly before. Without much talking, they got into a brawl. The blonde was tough, and when the protagonist fought her, he took a blow that knocked him out. He reunited with the goddess, who told him they didn't stand a chance against her. However, the waifu awakened a power that would help protect his waifus. When he returned to the fight, he powered up his girls like he did with the dragon before. Thanks to this, they managed to match the blonde, and she had to retreat even though she could have easily continued fighting them. In reality, she had already fulfilled her mission. On another front, Hatsune reunited with her sister. With her power, she managed to enter her mind and save her from the darkness she was in. She successfully expelled the shadow from her body, saved the people of the village and Shirorin. Afterwards, we see our protagonists spending time with the waifus they met and also gathering spices, which was their original purpose. On another front, Carol's teacher told her that besides keeping an eye on the princess, she should also watch over the protagonist because, thanks to the blonde, she learned that he had a hidden power. After this, the guys returned to their village, claimed their reward, and looked for a new job. They checked the board and found one that caught their attention: to be a teacher who knows the essentials of running a guild. The reward for this job was very high, so it seemed too good to be true. Later, they found out that the ad was placed by some girls who wanted to create their own guild but had no idea what they were doing. They asked our protagonists for help, but the waifus weren't very enthusiastic about the idea. The only one who was clueless about everything was the protagonist, so he accepted their proposal. The next day, they had an expedition to teach the girls what they needed to know. However, since the protagonist was the guide, he ended up getting lost and leading everyone astray. A random giant bird appeared and, as usual, kidnapped the protagonist. He gets kidnapped in every chapter. The girls went to rescue him, but in the end, they had to get help from the waifus to defeat the bird. They learned that creating a guild wasn't a game. It was risky, and they needed to work together to achieve things. In the end, the girls thanked them and continued their tour, having a good time. The next day, we see that Kakuro won a fish-shaped life buoy in some board games, so they thought about going to the beach to use it. Yes, folks, here comes the episode that can't be missed where you see the waifus in swimsuits. But the first lucky one who got to see Kakuro like that was the protagonist, as she was very nervous because she wasn't used to wearing that kind of clothing. So she went at night to model it, probably to have her lord measure the oil. Okay, no. The next morning they arrived at the sea, and there we see how much fun they had. They all bathed together, played around, and met Saren and her servant again. Kakuro introduced them to her friends, and they went to eat at a beach stand. Yes, folks, this waifu was quite the entrepreneur, selling all kinds of things like the merchant from Resident Evil 4. But her business was affected when another food stall set up on the beach and started stealing all her customers. So, the boys tried to help her find ingredients to improve her dishes and regain her clientele. But in the process, they met a waifu from the other guild named Akino, who, well, all she did was tease them to annoy them, although they ignored her and continued with their task. During their search, they encountered a giant squid that kidnapped a waifu who was with Akino. Fortunately, Saren and the waifus from the protagonist's guild managed to defeat it and save the girl. Thanks to this, they became friends with their rivals, used the squid's body to make a bunch of dishes, and even formed a partnership in the food business so they wouldn't compete anymore. And well, after that, we see Carol using a spell like Harry Potter's so everyone could dive underwater and swim with the fish. There's a very lovely scene among them, and Kakuro was the most grateful for it, as she got to share more with her lord than she expected. And folks, this waifu was really falling for the guy, as she had been very affectionate with him since they met. After their little vacation ended, the boys returned home to work. But before that, they enjoyed a good breakfast made by Pecorine, and then set off to deliver an order to the owner of the restaurant from before. When they arrived, they realized the old man was obsessed with pudding. There they met Shinobu, a waifu who reads fortunes in the city, accompanied by a ghost named Miyako, whom only the protagonist could see. Well, they went there because they heard the old man made an incredible pudding, and since Miyako was addicted to it, she kept stealing it. When the protagonist discovered her, he had no choice but to appear and leave everyone amazed. But the important thing here was that the waifus, upon seeing the protagonist's power, asked them to accompany her to her guild, Diabolos. When they arrived there, they were not well received by two dwarves, but the situation calmed down when Shinobu told them that he could be the person to make their wish come true, which was the resurrection of their queen. The thing is, this queen wasn't ordinary. She was a legendary vampire punished by the gods, sealed in crystal under a powerful spell. Although she could come out for a few seconds, her power weakened, turning her into a child. This is why they wanted to use the protagonist's strange power to reverse the spell and restore the waifu to her original form. When Ilya's bootylicious figure emerged and approached the protagonist, she said she didn't see anything special in him. Then her supposed bat subordinates started bothering her because they saw her defenseless. The protagonist carried her to save her, and while that happened, the waifu grew back thanks to her power. She thought she would stay that way forever, but that wasn't the case, thank goodness, because she already intended to take over the world or something. When the protagonist ran to help the vampire, he accidentally dropped the bag of puddings given to him by the old restaurant owner. Miyako was so hurt by this that she briefly stopped caring about her queen. They went to her house to have more pudding made for them again. They messed it up so badly that the lowly turned them into pudding to eat them. But just then, Pecorine arrived from the market, and when they explained what was happening, she made the most delicious pudding imaginable, which convinced Miyako to leave their friends alone. In a change of scene, we see Pecorine, Kokoro, and the protagonist going to the town to find a material to fix a plush toy that belonged to Carol. While walking around, the protagonist encountered a shadow about to attack someone in an alley. Without hesitation, he intervened to save them, but all he did was pass through it. This shadow was stronger than the others, and just as it was about to possess the protagonist's body, a waifu named Shizuru appeared and defeated it effortlessly. She claimed to know the protagonist and even called him brother, but when she started asking if he was injured and he didn't recognize her, he remembered he had lost his memory. Then another girl named Rino arrived, who also claimed to be the protagonist's sister. After taking her aside and giving her a good headbutt to calm her down, Shizuru told her they shouldn't talk to the protagonist because their mission was to watch over him. Meanwhile, Carol went to report to her master about everything she was doing. She was very happy with some flowers she planned to give her master, but everything changed when she realized she had created a new, stronger shadow which obeyed her faithfully. Its negative aura was so strong that it wilted the flowers just by passing by. Seeing her frightened expression, her master realized her little Sasuke lacked hatred. Back with the protagonist and Kokoro, they were still searching for materials for Carol's plush toy but took a break to eat something. Since the protagonist ate like a 3-year-old, Kokoro started cleaning his mouth. When she went to wet the handkerchief to remove the stains, they encountered the girls claiming to be the protagonist's sisters. After introductions and a bit of jealousy, especially from Rino who didn't like how close Kokoro was to her brother, they realized the protagonist had disappeared. They immediately thought a shadow had kidnapped him, mentioning to Kokoro that they had arrived in the city and people were disappearing. However, the disappearances were also due to the fat guy from before who was kidnapping people for his strange group or whatever it was. Accidentally grabbing one of the guys who had stolen Pecorine's sword and having befriended them, Carol went to rescue him. Just seeing her, the fat guy knew who was in charge and released the guy, even apologizing to her for causing trouble. As for the protagonist, we learned he was still alive and hadn't actually been kidnapped. He had to leave quickly because he saw Eriko and took the opportunity to check the job board, finding an interesting job to do alone. Thanks to this, he obtained the material needed for Carol's plush toy. When he told the girls everything, they were relieved, and his sisters realized that even though he had lost his memory, he still cared about helping others. Later, we see Carol arriving home dejected after her meeting with her master, as she was starting to dislike working for her and was growing more attached to her friends. Just after she arrived, her friends came with her plush toy. In a scene change, we see Pecorine having a nightmare about her parents or perhaps a bad memory, as we still don't know much about this waifu's parents. She wakes up crying, but after eating heartily, she feels better. She tells the others that she found a mission to defeat a monster obstructing the bridge to the city. This monster was blocking food deliveries, which affected everyone, especially Pecorine, who only thought about eating. Initially hesitant due to the mission's difficulty, Pecorine eventually convinces them. They work as a team and manage to bring down the monster, allowing the princess to unleash her powerful attack, Princess Strike, to finish it off. Afterward, they go to claim their reward. Pecorine treats them to food at a local spot she found in the city, where coincidentally the protagonist's sisters are disguised. They had visited this shop the first time Kokoro brought him to the capital, owned by a bespectacled waifu named Labarista, who had a mysterious secret. Upon seeing them, she lets the girls take care of them and attends to her own matters. These matters apparently involve the mutated shadow released by Carol's teacher, which was approaching the capital, consuming people in its path and growing stronger. That night, the protagonist dreams of his friends being killed and meets the goddess, who suggests these scenes could be memories of his past or premonitions of his future. Regardless, that moment could be approaching, and he must become stronger. They have no other choice. The next morning, he takes the goddess's advice and asks Pecorine to help him train. They have breakfast in the village, where the shadow they released arrives. It's no longer small and begins wreaking havoc across the city. Luckily, the princess is there and starts fighting it. However, this time, the waifu faces difficulty, causing significant damage to the city in one attack. Carol gets trapped in debris, but the princess shields her with her own body. Gathering all her power, she launches it at the shadow but fails to eliminate it. Then, the protagonist arrives and tries to unleash his power to protect his friends, but he collapses. Fortunately, they are transported to another dimension by the bespectacled waifu, who reveals herself as their ally. Simultaneously, Kokoro discovers that Pecorine is the daughter of the kingdom's rulers. So folks, it turns out Pecorine is actually Princess Yustiana. She told Kokoro that when she was about to ascend to the throne, she was sent on a mission to see the lands she would rule. However, upon her return, no one could remember who she was, not even her parents. This was thanks to Carol's teacher, who brainwashed everyone and took her place. So, she had no choice but to leave the castle. That's when she started traveling around the outskirts of the city and met them. She didn't want to tell them for fear that they would also forget who she was, losing all the happy moments she had spent with them. But Kokoro assured her that she would never abandon her and wasn't upset about her keeping that secret. Their friends would understand too. Speaking of them, the protagonist continued talking with the bespectacled waifu, who confirmed that the dreams he had were memories of his past, where everyone had departed. She also told him that he had great power but couldn't use it because he lost his memory. However, after talking with her, he could now use it, but he had to be careful not to overuse it, as it could endanger his own life. Meanwhile, Carol was still fighting against her teacher's shadow. She regretted disobeying her but didn't want to lose her friends, whom she had betrayed and was remorseful for. She knew she didn't stand a chance against that thing. Just when she was about to meet her end, Pecorine arrived to the rescue. Although the two of them couldn't handle the shadow, just when they thought all was lost, the protagonist made an epic entrance and finally awakened his power. With it, he buffed all his companions, and thanks to that, they managed to beat the monster and defeat it. After this, they were transported to the tavern where several people who had helped them were very worried about them. When they arrived, they were received as heroes. And so, the Gourmet Guild continued their adventures. After starting the day and having breakfast, the members of the Gourmet Guild use a map given to Kokoro by Karen in search of the legendary spice, the Drop of the Sea. Despite not knowing whether this map is true or false, the Gourmet Guild accepts it without hesitation due to their motto. To find all kinds of delicious recipes. During their journey, they encounter several problems, such as dogs that always annoy the protagonist, or simply eat something that leaves them with this really happy face. You know what I mean? Anyway, they end up in a coral forest where fish are flying high in the air. Without needing to sniff around, they decide to satisfy their hunger with lots of fish, but they eat so much that Carol ends up fed up, wanting to eat meat. Parasine decides to fulfill the Nico's whims, and she and Yuki go in search of meat, where once again the dogs capture them. She sees them, they see her while biting the protagonist, and suddenly she has an idea. Why don't we eat these critters? Wait, what? Obviously, the dogs run away and decide to leave the protagonist lying there like trash. Since the idea was good, they start thinking about how to get their attention again. Well, it was pretty obvious. Use Yuki as bait. The craziest thing is that it actually works. They get what they were looking for. They return to the camp and wake Carol up to eat together. However, while they were eating, they are alerted by a wave of monsters. While Pecorine has huge chunks of meat in her hand, they prepare for battle. There, Carol realizes something is OFF. That creature has fur just like the scarf Pecorine gave her. And well, yes, those creatures are the same ones they were devouring. The Nico gets angry and out of nowhere, she collapses to the ground, vomiting rainbows from her mouth. She with great faith leaves her friends in charge, but damn it, they were all neutralized. Turns out that idiot Pecorine didn't extract the poison from the meat, and now they are paralyzed because of it. Before being attacked by the monsters, they are rescued by an old man, who also gives them a tea made from the forest coral that is effective against their paralysis. Talking with him, they discover that he and his guild also sought the Drop of the Sea, so he guides them part of the way, ending up in front of a tree where, in addition to complementing their map, they face 3 spirits. The detail is that Kokoro realizes that these are the spirits of the old man's former guild members. The elf asks everyone to calm down, as these people were not bad. She performs an enchantment to purify them, where they see that the old man was also a ghost. Turns out his friends fell into a curse that left them trapped, as he couldn't leave them alone. He spent his whole life in that place, his soul wandering until someone helped purify them. The 4 crazy ones ask to have one last group trip together, regardless of them being spirits. They agree and have one last adventure for the Drop of the Sea. After passing many trials, they reach the famous turtle's place, which grants the drop through a tear. It did so every time it laid its eggs, and it seems they arrived at the exact moment of birth. But 24 hours pass and this creature still has its neck stretched and never lays anything. The protagonist approaches to check, and indeed it was a male. So the old man trolled them and there never was a drop as such. The ghosts disappear laughing, but at least they had one last happy adventure. If you want to know the name of this anime, during the video it will appear down here, so leave in the comments the exact minute it appeared. years, so that this tremendous blonde punishes you. Chapter 2. The next morning, after returning from a mission to get rainbow-colored silk thread, the Gourmet Guild splits up, with Yuki going to deliver the thread while his companions stay behind to wash clothes. When Yuki enters the store, he is unexpectedly attacked by measuring tapes. When the girls arrive, they find the protagonist totally different, with a diva style that no one can take away. This crazy girl dresses him up like an idol to test the resistant material they were given. But Kokoro and Pecorine don't escape being caught in beautiful outfits either. But where is the Nico? Turns out Carol presented herself before Her Majesty for her report. Remember, Carol is actually monitoring Pecorine and Yuki, as this beautiful mommy's plans are to take them down. The thing is, the queen knows everything. Yes, the Nico thought she had hidden her participation in the city's battle, but in reality, the lady saw the whole fight through the demon mask. Her queen knew her daughter had betrayed her, but despite everything, she forgives her. She's the only one she can trust in this world full of lies. Back to the clothing extravaganza. The girls who received the thread are Nozomi, Chika, and Tsumuji, members of the Carmina Guild. Basically, the city's idols. To get to know each other better, both guilds eat together, but Yuki separates to wash up. There, some guys show up with intentions to mess with him for getting close to one of the idols, because it turns out the Carmina Guardians Club are fans of these waifus, virgins who will never touch a waifu's finger. But the protagonist says to them, "My friend, this guy you see here, is the only one who dared to throw down with 1 million creatures to find the silk, which they will use for their outfits." Okay, I exaggerated about the creatures, but you get the idea. Everyone is surprised, and from that moment on, they earn Yuki's respect. As night falls, Carol visits Her Majesty again, where the hot blonde we like so much appears. Christina informs her that the queen has summoned them both for an important mission that only they can accomplish, and they must work from the shadows. And speaking of shadows, at that moment 2 people were devoured in an alley by a dark mass. The next morning, Carol leaves early for a commitment, spending the whole day out, and at night she meets Tsumuji, who was still rehearsing because she felt she could still improve and stand out on stage, so as not to be overshadowed by her companions. On concert day, Christina and Carol take care of the wayward shadows without anyone at the concert noticing. These were the orders they received from Her Majesty. Exhausted after the battle, Carol falls asleep under a bridge, wondering if what she's doing is right, but wakes up to hear her guildmates shouting her name like crazy. Yuki and Kokoro went shopping and encountered Aoi, who asked for their help. She had transferred to the girls' academy in Landisol, but was very shy, so months had passed since she joined without being able to introduce herself. Her issue now was being called upon by one of the academy's prominent senpais. Yuki and Kokoro agreed to accompany her as members of Team BB. They arranged to meet at a library called the Ivory Tower, where they found Uni, a student from the academy and the one who had called Aoi. After introductions and Uni eating preserved cereal with a plum inside. "Yes, people, it's rice with plum and that's IT." She mentioned working on a thesis about fundamental falsehoods that embitter the world. They were joined in the conversation by Chieru, a first-year student, and Chloe, a second-year student. The main topic discussed was a paranormal investigation, with Aoi as the key guide in Forestier Forest to solve the mystery of the Green Guardians. Aoi, Uni, Chieru, and Chloe met up with the Gourmet Guild in the forest, who accompanied them in case things got out of control. Venturing deeper into the eerie forest, they came across a cemetery Aoi had never seen before. Investigating briefly, they found the tomb of the King of Kralinos, gathering information for their thesis before leaving. They encountered thick fog next, but Uni assured them with her GPS, introducing Rosetta, a stone with installed virtual consciousness providing their location and other functions. Suddenly, they found themselves back at the same cemetery. When they asked Rosetta for help, her voice turned terrifyingly silent, and then into a terror, scaring them into a wild run. In the fog, they saw silhouettes, and Aoi got separated from them. Facing 2 options, either the elf was with San Pedro or was still in the cemetery, they decided to split into groups, a very erroneous idea. While Carly went with Kokoro and the cheerful girl, they began disappearing one by one. Carol decided to flee, catching sight of the protagonist in the distance, but when she called out, she tripped and fell down a small cliff. Getting up, she saw huge creatures, and out of nowhere, Aoi broke her neck. Wait, what? Aoi was pissed because she had bent the necks of all the girls. Pecorine, the protagonist, and Uni found her burying the girls. Discovering the silhouettes were Aoi's other friends who were always fine. She only tried to hide her secret loneliness. However, the crew must have inhaled something weird because many skeletons came out. They went on an astral journey, passing through memories of the late King Kralinos, who was haunted by regrets for not hearing his only daughter's words. Pecorine hugged him, giving him great relief, finally purifying him so he could rest in peace. Days pass and Pecorine, who doesn't stay still for a single moment, they decide to visit Monster Island. However, they end up in trouble as they know nothing about the place. Being attacked by a huge beast, the protagonist suddenly gains that power-up glow for a moment, but gets shut down with a punch that sends him flying, and a bird ends up carrying him away in its beak. This protagonist has worse luck than all of US combined. Yuki ends up separated from his team once again, but is rescued by some girls who also rescue the other members of the Gourmet Guild. They are the Power Rangers. Okay, no, they introduce themselves as Meiho, Kasumi, Makoto, and Kaori, members of the K-On! Guild. They are on the island investigating the recent increase in shadow appearances, which is very serious for their town because if they breach the wall, the shadows would wipe out the entire population in an instant. So, the Gourmet Guild decides to help them in their investigation, splitting into two teams. Yuki's team, with Kakuro, Meiho, and Kasumi, is the first to encounter the shadows, fighting against them and capturing a shadow that took the same form as Kasumi. Wait, what? Yes, the shadow copied her appearance, only repeating things the original Kasumi says, but each time it interacts with the protagonist, it begins to develop its own consciousness and its friendly attitude starts to show. Something quite strange, since shadows are creatures that like chaos, not playing cute and receiving affection. While they continue their investigation, Makoto, Pecorine, Kaori, and Carol's team encounters a large number of shadows in the distance, attacking a large golem. That night, discussing what they've discovered, they are visited by Metamaragnant. This waifu, why in the world does she have that name? She is one of the 7 sages who created the goddess Minerva, who in turn is one of the 7 crowns. And moreover, for some reason she claims to be a friend of the protagonist, or at least she was in the past. Anyway, she warns them, since her original body is the core of the golem devoured by the shadows, if they don't hurry to help her, she won't have control over the beast and it will attack the city, where she won't be able to do anything to help. The next day, the shadow army along with the golem heads straight for the city, so the Gourmet and K-On! Guilds confront them, seeking to destroy the golem or free the waifu from inside. The girls, with a great sequence of evasions, manage to enter inside the beast. Being close to doing so, Makoto and Kaori are expelled from the interior, but Pecorine doesn't give up. So she starts to unleash Princess Strike one after another. However, she disappears when it seems she was about to achieve the goal, appearing in the castle of Landisol, right in front of the Mami Fura. With Pecorine's disappearance, both guilds decide to retreat and devise a plan to stop the golem. At that moment, Yuki and Kasumi hear loud noises coming from the place where they had the strange shadow. Kiri is scared because the creatures are coming after her. The protagonist arrives like the great alpha male to save her, but upon making slight contact with her, he begins to have strange visions of the past. Although these visions are not clear, he knows he is talking to someone. Returning to reality, after defeating the creatures, Yuki, Kakuro, and Kasumi notice that the shadows are heading towards Kiri's location. They take her to the lake to set a trap for the shadows and buy time while the nearby village is evacuated. But this is where everything goes to hell. As they run, strange glitch-like lights start appearing. These bugs seem to affect the world they are in frequently, and the shadows seem to be bugs of this world as well. When they are close to achieving their objective, a light causes Kiri to vanish, leading Yuki to lose control over his power due to desperation. Not knowing what the hell to do, his power goes out of control. No matter how much the waifu tries to calm his power in whatever space-time she is in, she fails. There, he sees memories where Kiri seemed to be someone special in the past, which is why she called him her superior. Before leaving, she thanks him for trying to save her, but what she appreciates most is the affection he gave her in the short time they were together. Don't cry just yet. Thanks to this comrade, Kiri could be saved, at least her memories. So when the time comes to reunite them, he could set her free. We also get to see the protagonist's past, or at least one of his lives in this world. Turns out the guy literally got screwed. The furry mommy stabbed him, and he met St. Peter. They lost that battle. Carly, Pecorine, and Kakuro had died, but thanks to his friends or these waifus, he got another chance. He would go back in time but without memories, where he would once again create bonds with his friends and become stronger to save everyone from that world. Now we understand why the guy has broken buffs. He just doesn't remember how to use them. Once Yuki quickly recovers, he returns with Kakuro and Kasumi to help the other girls in that rigorous fight. Meanwhile, Pecorine faces her majesty psychologically, having a conversation they never had, falling into despair at the thought of being forgotten again, this time by her friends from the Gourmet Guild. But Pecorine also manages to recover, so her majesty, seeing that determination, smiles, mentioning that she will let her bonds grow even stronger to take everything from her. She teleports her back to the battlefield where she disappeared. Entering the fight with Yuki's support power and a super powerful Princess Strike, they manage to stop the golem, leaving everyone greatly impressed and anxious as Pecorine was still missing. But thank God, the waifu was fine, just hungry. With the appearance of a mysterious knight causing havoc in Landisol, the Gourmet Guild decides to take on the mission to stop him and ensure everyone can eat safely. safely. Meanwhile, we meet a rather grumpy blonde named Monica, a spy from a neighboring country. She came to gather information about Landisol in case of war. However, while fundraising, her guild of bumbling idiots caused an explosion that destroyed a bridge. As a result, they have to repair it themselves to earn enough money to survive. Monica thinks the best way to do this is to capture the mysterious knight and claim the reward. Meanwhile, the protagonist's group splits up to find clues about this enemy. Yuki and Kakuro are lucky enough to encounter the knight but are overpowered. They think it's time to meet St. Peter, but they are rescued by a mysterious swordswoman. Geez, everyone here is mysterious. Oh, I forgot to mention something. In Monica's guild, there is a girl named Kaka. Anyway, an old man at the bar warns the protagonist about a drink going around that makes people act strange and stimulates them in a weird way. Kaka leaves the bar already feeling tipsy and is soon wandering around happily. This concoction was created by none other than the crazy medics who almost ate the protagonist. And when I say ate, I mean in every sense of the word. The protagonist looks for the redhead and finds her browsing suggestive magazines in broad daylight. Yep, folks, the waifu is hotter than the sun every second, so the protagonist sets the magazines on fire, leaving her whining. Though her suffering seemed quite pleasurable to her, back to the Flugel Guild, led by the blonde Monica, they come across a viscous substance that seems to bring objects to life. Their plan changes to finding more of the substance to bring toys to life and sell them. People went crazy when they saw a toy monkey doing things a normal toy wouldn't do. Like maniacs, they start digging and, well, they get into a sticky situation that explodes on the outskirts of the city. In the city center, the Knights of Landisol are battling the mysterious knight, who turns out to be June, the leader of the knights. However, the mysterious swordswoman is the real June, and the knight is nothing but her armor brought to life by the substance. Working as a team, they manage to stop it, but they are alerted when Yuki and Carol appear, chased by an immense amount of viscous substance. The substance fuses once more with the armor, creating a much larger and more dangerous enemy. The Gourmet Guild springs into action. With Kakuro chaining, we see her movements for a short time, or while the knights and citizens free the girls trapped inside the beast. Once freed, Pekarine finishes the job with her powerful princess strike, which ends up wrecking a large part of the city. But HUI and O1 hurt. Monica sends this report to her country, mentioning that there's something she likes about this place, and it's that people protect each other and, despite not having any special abilities to help, they do the impossible to support one another. In a change of scene, we see one of the idols running through the forest, mentioning that a forbidden seal had been released. Her memories are gradually fading to the point where she stops and doesn't know who the hell she is. Meanwhile, our protagonists are working peacefully in the fields. On their way back, the protagonist gets a massive hit from some little girls. The girls are being chased by bees, and they help them out. They introduce themselves as Ayane, along with her best friend and family Pukichi, a bear as her weapon, and Kurumi, members of the Serendia orphanage. They were in the forest because they wanted to give their mother, the waifu who takes care of everyone in the orphanage, a lemonade with honey since they saw her very tired. However, they messed with a beehive, causing chaos. Pekarine invites them to eat and promises to help with their issue. Together, they head to the cockatrice's nest, aka the restaurant. On their way, they encounter Chika, who is behaving quite unusually. They take her to the tavern, where the protagonist freaks out because his favorite idol is there. They search for Nozomi, and everyone wonders what the hell happened. They start discussing Chika's behavior, and suddenly, Kurumi starts acting completely out of character. Yes, the waifu stands up, walks to this table, and slaps the protagonist. She begins insulting him and mentions that he betrayed her, talking about a supposed marriage and even intimate relations. What the hell? But it didn't just affect her. It also affected Pukichi and the tavern owner. Everyone starts switching bodies. Somehow, Pukichi ends up inside Chika, who can briefly return the idol to normal to explain what happened. It turns out she foolishly sought the fairy Foggy to try to recover the protagonist's lost memories. But since this creature is very playful, it took hers instead and started messing with everyone present. It's likely even they're mocking them. Pekarine and Carol go to the place where Foggy was sealed, while the others stay to help normalize the situation. When Carol and Pekarine return with a magical artifact, Foggy is revealed, and they engage in a battle against it. However, physical attacks do no damage. At this moment, Yuki gets caught in an attack while protecting Pekarine, which helps him remember more of his past. Coming to his senses, Yuki uses his support to boost Chika and Nozomi's power. Chika performs a chant that transforms Foggy into a dragon-like form, allowing Nozomi to deal damage with her powerful attack and reseal the creature that caused them so many problems. Members of the Gourmet Guild are separated. Carol is in the castle, Pecorine is harvesting rice, and Yuki is reflecting on his former companions, discussing them with Labarista. Labarista tells him that he cannot forgive himself for forgetting his old friends, but he is grateful for the new chance he has had to meet girls who have made him happy. Despite his clumsiness, they care about him. At that moment, Kakuro arrives to deliver a large number of letters. However, the post office is attacked by thieves who, in addition to stealing the gold, also take the letters. They stole the letters too? That's just unbelievable. Suzuna and Misaki, who are present, are concerned because their recommendation letters were in that package. Hearing their plan to retrieve them, Kakuro decides to join them. Thanks to Kakuro's fairies, which she hid among the thieves' bags during the commotion, the three girls manage to find their hideout. Young Misaki decides to use her feminine charms to distract them, but ends up getting captured. Kakuro creates smoke to distract the thieves, rescuing Misaki and recovering the letters before escaping. However, they are discovered and pursued. Although Suzuna fights back with her bow, furiously shooting with the intention to make them disappear, her power only covers them in dust. Just when they think they are doomed, Tomo and some knights accompanying Io, Suzuna and Misaki's teacher, save them. The letters Suzuna and Misaki wanted to recover were recommendation letters to transfer to another school because both had very poor grades, and the academy teachers no longer wanted them. However, teacher Io was the only one who had not given up on them at Lucent Academy. After recovering the letters, they decide to tear up their recommendations and continue striving alongside their teacher Tio learn the multiplication tables. Wait, what? While Pecorine continues harvesting rice, Yuki and later Carol join her. Before they arrive, Pecorine had a dream where she feared that if she told the protagonist and the Nico that she is the princess, they would distance themselves from her or she would lose everything again. While working with them, Kakuro appears with a huge number of characters. Yes, people, even characters from season 1. The letters she wrote were to ask everyone for help in harvesting the rice faster. Teamwork is very enjoyable, and it is at this moment that we get emotional with Pecorine. Despite having lost everything, she never thought she would have so much more than she had before. This large number of friendships and the joy of sharing meals with them made her immensely happy. She resolves that no matter what happens, she will tell Yuki and Carol the truth. Next morning, Pecorine is nervous about telling Carol the truth, but she hesitates too much and loses the opportunity. Carol quickly leaves with a bowl of food she had prepared for someone else. This food was for none other than Her Highness, who was having trouble sleeping. Seeing her in that state, Carol decides to stay with her. When Her Highness wakes up and sees Carol by her side, Carol apologizes for her boldness, but is glad she is okay. She shows her the food and asks if they can eat together, reminding her of what Pecorine had said. Encouraged by this, they both eat together peacefully. But then we see in the shadows a second Nico mommy. Wait, are you telling me there are two? But that's not all. The captain of the knights finds a secret place protected by several seals. After crossing them all, she finds Meta hidden, or rather sealed, in that mysterious place. Yes, the waifu with the long name. The waifu is surprised and quickly launches an attack as a massive group of shadows appears, along with the other Nico mommy. But this one has a rather terrifying face. Back with the others, when Carol returns, she is dragged to a festival happening in the market, where they all have fun together. They meet Rino and Shizuru, along with Labarista. Yuki talks to Labarista alone again, promising to protect everyone, including her. This time, I don't know about you, but the redhead's visit felt like a farewell. Pecorine spent the entire day trying to talk to Carol, but never managed to, despite having Kakuro's support, who arranged for them to be alone. Meanwhile, Labarista talks with Her Majesty. Yes, the waifu appears in the castle and takes her to another world created by her power. In that place, words are unnecessary, and they have a complicated battle where only one will come out alive. Labarista faces her alone, as the other members of the Labyrinth Guild are holding off the shadows, Her Majesty's main power source. Because yes, the waifu, despite controlling Meta's power and making things extremely difficult for Labarista, lost her primary power known as Omniscient Kaiser since the time she sent everyone to the lobby. By using so much of her power, it gradually depleted, forcing her to depend on the shadows to survive. Now, she also cannot use the waifu's power due to the lack of energy. It was checkmate. Labarista had the battle in her pocket. A simple thrust would end it all. But although she seemed to have the advantage, a sudden appearance of Carol in the battle and an attack from behind leave Queen Labarista in very bad shape or possibly dead. Carol hasn't returned, which worries Pecorine. They still hope she will come back when she gets hungry, so Pecorine and Kakuro plan to prepare her favorite meal. However, they are alerted by Yuki after the arrival of Miyako and Shinobu, who inform them that the entire Diablo's guild was attacked by Carol, and Akari, Yori, and Ilya were captured. What? Not only that, but they also possessed the power of the Labyrinth Queen. With no time to process what they had heard, the kingdom kingdom of Landisol is enclosed in immense walls forming a dome. The Majesty appears and tells everyone, "It's time for a duel." Just kidding, she announces that everyone will be sacrificed for their own good. Carol appears in a hologram and summons an army of shadows to attack the people of Landisol. The Gourmet Guild heads to the center of it all to find out what's happening and to help as needed. They face a large number of shadows, but Pekarine rushes ahead after seeing a powerful explosion. There, we see how, in the library, the detective returns with a book they were sent to retrieve from the castle. Somehow, the thief infiltrated and rescued something that could be of great help. They deduce that the entire town of Landisol must have lost their memory or had important memories of the princess erased, as the current Majesty does not possess the real crown. This very crown is only held by Pekarine. They realize that all this time they have been with the real princess, so they devise a plan to reveal the truth. Meanwhile, the protagonist and the elf try to reach Pekarine, but the guy has a headache, causing him to faint again. The elf defends him from the shadows, even receiving help from the people to run away as the shadows approach in hordes. On the other hand, when Pekarine arrives at the scene, she finds Carol attacking civilians. But before she can have a conversation with her, Her Majesty orders Carol to attack Pekarine, leading to a fight between them. Pekarine tries to defend the civilians still present in the area. It is then that a call from Uni, transmitted through the stones of Landisol, reveals that the princess sitting on the throne is not the real Yustiana. This angers Her Majesty, who orders Carol to kill everyone. Shortly after the attacks begin, Carol stops because she doesn't want to do it, but she is controlled like a puppet by Her Majesty. Carol cries, begging for her life to be ended as she does not want to hurt anyone. In fact, her initial attacks did not harm anyone. Carol asks Pekarine to save her. Our princess stops Carol's massive attack and declares that as the true Princess Yustiana, she will reclaim Landisol, and everyone can eat with a smile. In a change of scene, our favorite Yandere makes her appearance. The Twilight Caravan Guild infiltrates the castle to try to rescue Meta's real body. There, they encounter Christina, who is protecting all the captives, including the Labyrinth Guild. Christina's goal is to collect the souls and powers of everyone to awaken the unmatched, incredibly powerful furry mommy. Facing off against her are Eriko, Mitsuki, and Nanika. Christina manages to hold them at bay, even gaining the upper hand against the three. Yes, folks, our impressive blonde is handling them effortlessly, leaving everyone stunned. But what about the protagonist? He remains unconscious as everyone runs from a massive wave of shadows, including the formidable shadow from the first season. For a moment, the elf falls into a sort of dream state where she receives a key from a waifu. This key will help protect the protagonist, as his Princess Knight is losing control every time he tries to protect them, severely affecting his body. Thanks to the girls and a giant chicken, they are temporarily safe. In the city, huge chains summoned by Carol knock her unconscious. Amidst the chaos with Christina, Anna and Ruka arrive and land a hit on Christina. However, using her 7-crown power, Numbers Avalon, Christina has absolute attack and defense. The time gained in this confrontation is enough for Eriko to free some of the captives. But things are about to get even more intense. Her Majesty summons the captain of the kingdom's knights, June, to face the true Princess Yustiana. A battle ensues between them, and our dear Pekarine ends up being injured with a severe blow to her ribs. However, using Princess Strike, Pekarine pierces through June's powerful defense and awakens her from her puppet state, joining forces with the true princess to confront Her Majesty. Pekarine and June manage to pressure Her Majesty, forcing her to fight herself and eventually defeating her, saving Carol. However, they discover that Her Majesty was nothing more than a conscious shadow. That's when her true form, Kaiser, appears. With a single blow, she takes June out of the fight and puts Carol and Pekarine in a dire position. As they are about to be overwhelmed by shadows, Yuki enters the battle, saving his companions and standing before Kaiser, ready to face her once again. The Gourmet Guild prepares to confront Kaiser, with Pekarine attacking her with a Princess Strike at maximum power, supported by Yuki. Kaiser counters with Labarista and Meta, creating a barrage of daggers, but they are repelled by Carol, who is determined to help her friends, including saving Kaiser and inviting her to eat together. Despite the power of the 7 crowns, Kaiser manages to subdue Pekarine. Yuki, employing a risky strategy, charges at Kaiser in an attempt to free Labarista from her captivity as her Princess Knight. Once freed, Labarista and Nanika attack Kaiser, managing to wound her. Realizing defeat, Kaiser allows herself to be consumed by the darkness of a shadow, believing it will help achieve her goal, but ultimately fails. Faced with a formidable shadow to deal with, the Gourmet Guild is not alone as members of other guilds join them, including the Knights Order with their Captain June and Vice Captain Christina. With the outside support secured, the Gourmet Guild ventures into the shadow to find Mana and save her, leaving Carol to handle her role, but Yuki is gravely injured in the process. Once again, the protagonist faces Labarista and Amith. This time, Yuki decides to protect the bonds he has forged. Returning to Pekarine and Kakuro to lend a hand to Carol and save Mana, the battle concludes. As the sun's light appears in a beautiful sunset, Mana regrets her actions and is arrested, while Pekarine reunites with her parents and reclaims all that was stolen. Peace reigns in Landasol, although the Gourmet Guild loses a member as the princess now has other duties to fulfill. Carol attempts to cook well, and the three sit looking at the empty seat when suddenly she arrives, asking to be readmitted to the guild. She realizes she has much to learn about fighting and many dishes to discover. Everyone rejoices and welcomes her back, bringing happiness as Pekarine finally fulfills her mission and the protagonist protects the bonds he cherishes. If you want more anime full of powerful waifus, comment below.